as creative leaders, we have a responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right.
To make sure that we're leading with empathy, we've got respect for people, we're valuing people, we're not leading with fear, because otherwise that will happen and we lose all these amazing creatives.
Welcome to Nothing Something Nothing. We're here with Creative Director and Head of Brand Design and Identity at Kimberly-Clark, Christie Gray.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. You're very welcome. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you.
You've had a really wonderful spanning career, lots of different positions, really interesting and engaging brands. Could you just tell us, just in the first instance, how you got into the pathway to developing your career?
For me, it started at school. Design and technology, that was my lesson. I loved it. I had a really, really great teacher who was really inspiring. You could just tell he loved it. We had this project set for us where we had to create a brand and create a shop front. So it was creating the logo, creating the name, making like this architect's model of the shop windows and the design to go inside it. And I just fell in love with that. I thought it was brilliant. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, graphic design, that's kind of what I want to do. It showed me how creativity could be commercial. And that was always the big thing. I think my parents really encouraged me to be creative, but my dad was always like, okay, but you need to make money. So how are you going to do that? So graphic design became the thing that I wanted to do. I then went on to uni, studied at Falmouth, which was amazing. And then I got my first kind of taste of the industry after that. So I went to London, did some internships, worked my way around a lot of the branding and packaging studios there. Eventually I did some freelancing, but London was so expensive. So I came back to Bristol and I got my first junior design role for a company that specialized in food and drink packaging. So that was really exciting. It was also a really small studio. So it meant that naturally you kind of do a bit of everything. So there was a bit of project management, looking after clients, presenting. So it was a real kind of baptism of fire into that job, but it served me really well from that point onwards. And from there, I then went to another agency, which was very much branding and packaging, but more FMCG. Also went in-house, so worked at Clark's, and that was much more of an advertising creative role. But it really showed me 360 brand building, advertising, and then also what it means to be in-house. So the fact that not only have you got all these amazing projects that you need to execute and create, but you've got the kind of commercial side of the business as well that you need to take into consideration. So that was a really big learning curve for me, but it was kind of adding that extra kind of expertise. And then from there, I went to freelancing. So another kind of string to the bow, I suppose, in terms of development, back in-house again at OVO Energy, and then now to my most recent role as Head of Brand Identity and Design at Kimberly-Clark.
Lovely. How was the stint of freelancing?
I really enjoyed it. It did not pay well. It was through COVID. So it was the complete wrong time. I'd basically decided I was going to go freelance. I'd handed my notice in at Clark's. Shortly after I started freelancing, it was COVID, everything shut down. So you remember there was that period where it was just nothing. Nobody was working at all. Yeah. And it slowly started to build back up. But I think because I was so new to freelancing, it was really hard to get those gigs because we weren't able to go into studios and meet people and have that kind of meeting with them and go through portfolios. It was all kind of virtual. So I think they pretty much leaned on their existing freelancers as kind of the vibe that I got. So whilst I did okay and got through that time, it just was not really financially the same level as being kind of full-time employed. And I actually missed being part of something. So I think as a freelancer, sometimes you get brought in, or quite often you get brought in, either to solve the big creative problem or part of a brief where you're coming in to pick something up when someone's on holiday or finish something off or whatever that might be. And you don't really get that end to end in a project.
Yeah, I understand. It seems that you realized quite early on that creativity can be commercial and you can build a career out of it. Uh, for a lot of people, I feel like that does seem to come a little bit later. Would you say? You seem to have quite an understanding, whether that was from your dad or not, I don't know. But maybe I get the sense that you kind of understood yourself that, like, oh no, this passion or this like interest can actually, there's successful ambition here within this at quite a young age.
Yes, I would say definitely that is the case. My dad definitely highlighted it earlier on.
How did he highlight that?
Basically saying you need to make money. It was very much, he was very encouraging in terms of, you know, drawing, painting, making things, doing whatever, like do what you want, do what makes you happy. But he highlighted to me that graphic design was a route to be commercial with it, as opposed to being a painter. Obviously that can be commercial, but it's a lot harder. So this felt like a really kind of solid route to go into. He knew that there were really brilliant courses in terms of like universities and things. There was a path there basically. So that's what he kind of showed me and really kind of landed the importance of that. I would say it wasn't really until I went in-house that I saw truly how commercially creative kind of needs to be and how it needs to not only ladder up to the brief. I think when you're agency side, like the brief is the holy grail and does it answer the brief? Yes, brilliant, job done. Actually, it's the business objectives. Does it answer the business objectives, which is a different thing? And then how do you prove that? And you start getting into the realms of metrics. So I think once you start to get to that level and understand that bit, that's where you see, yes, here's the true kind of commercial line through creativity.
How much do you think creativity you are born with it, or how much is it environmental? How much is learned at the early stage, do you think?
That's a really interesting one, because I would say it's both.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I was definitely naturally drawn to creativity, but there was a huge nurture element of it with my family. But I think when you kind of go through life, it always tends to pull you back. So, you know, I was no good at sports. I wasn't that academic at school. It was always creativity that always pulled me back. That was the force that drew me in. So like I mentioned, that project in design and technology class, like that was the thing that I was going back at lunchtime to go and finish. I wasn't playing in the playground with my friends. I wasn't chatting to them. I was going back there to finish that project because I wanted to put the extra mile in. So it's always had that kind of pulling force. And something that was really interesting to me, which I didn't realize till much later, and this was in my first design role. I'd just joined the company. And so I was a brand new designer. I was about 21, you know, straight out of university. And unfortunately, the creative director of that agency had terminal cancer and he was in a hospice. So it was quite a difficult time, like starting, you know, creative director's missing. Obviously, it's quite a sensitive and emotional thing. And the MD came to me and said, he would love for you to go up to the hospice and take the project you're working on and go through it with him and just run through some feedback. And that felt extremely scary to me to go and do that. But I did it. I went up to the hospice. I went to see him. The receptionist, you know, escorted me through, and you just felt the grief in the room. There were other patients there, families. It was very, very heavy. But as soon as I got to where he was, he had this way of just making you feel really comfortable. He's such a lovely guy. And we sat there and we spoke through the work, and I was probably there about an hour or so. And I could just see what it meant to him, how his eyes lit up when we spoke through the project. And I can't even remember what the project was. I definitely don't remember any of his feedback, but that was the thing that stuck with me, that, you know, he's going through this really, really tough time. He's at the end of his life, but it's creativity that's pulling him back. He still wants to be involved. This is his happy place. This is what he wants to do in his, you know, possibly last weeks or months on this planet. So that really landed with me.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah.
As wow, it's in us from the beginning and it's innate to who we are.
Yeah. That was obviously a moment there for you. Not necessarily other moments, but any other mentors that resonated? along your early journey?
Yeah, so I've had good and bad mentors, and I think
Go on.
there's a few that have stuck out to me. There was one in particular earlier on in my career, a creative director who had this very kind of top-down, old-school leadership style, which wasn't the best. So in terms of what that looked like, we'd work on a project, we'd put our thoughts and ideas up on the wall, he'd come over and critique it, and quite often that meant being sworn at or, having our work torn apart in front of the team. And it just created this environment of kind of walking on eggshells all the time and just feeling very nervous and anxious about anything. And for me, that's not an environment I thrive in. So it made me feel very anxious. It made me play really safe with the ideas that I was coming up with, because I was just basically terrified that I was going to get shouted out in front of everybody.
Right.
So it's like, okay, what's the safest idea I can put out there just to survive this? And it just, it was quite a low point, to be honest, because I'd built up all this hype of, I've got the job at this particular company and it's going to be amazing and it's going to do wonders for my career. And actually it shut me down. It really made me go into myself. On the flip side of that, I've had really good mentors as well. I've had a great head of creative who gave me the kind of clarity, the space, the safety to really nurture my own ideas, to have confidence in my voice and myself, and think a lot braver because I had his support. And it's amazing what it'll do for you when you've got the support of your leader backing you and in your corner, wanting you to win. It just does wonders for your kind of bravery. So that showed me kind of how not to lead and how to lead, and had a huge impact of how I lead my own team now.
It's great to identify with both, I suppose. Like everyone should try and identify with both as they meander their way through their career, because you take a lot from both sides. Do you think the first person you were referring to there, do they still exist this day and age? Like more so, less so, that type of approach?
I think a lot less so. It reminds me of the kind of like Mad Men era.
Yeah. There was a moment, I think, where that was the way to be almost, or the thinking was, I need to be like this.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm the creative director. I need to instill a little bit of fear into people. I don't think that exists very much at all now, luckily. But I think that's because we've got a generation of people who kind of went through that and thought, actually, this is terrible. If this is creativity, if this is the creative industry, I don't want to be a part of it. 100%. And that's literally went through my mind as I was working there.
I had that exact thought when I first left uni. I started working in the film features industry. The understanding at that point was, I will do anything I can to be on set. I will make your coffees all day. I will run here, then over. I will log footage. I'll do whatever I can. And I think for 2 years, I kind of just did that. I did whatever was available to me. And I couldn't get to grips with the hierarchical structure of who to report to. And any ideas were just suppressed down here because of who you were. Like I couldn't chat to like the DOP that easily. I couldn't ask any questions. It was just, you're just kind of down there. You're the runner. Go and get me that prop from the art department, And I was like, this is not what I wanted to do. And I went away and I didn't work in the industry for 5-6 years because of those first 2 years experience. I was like, this is not for me. This is not, I don't want to be talked to like this. I don't want to be communicated to like this. This is not quite what I expected.
No, and I think it's really sad, isn't it? Because how many people quit and don't come back?
Those ones that quit may be the most talented, most hardworking, have fantastic values, ethics, amazing creativity, vision leaders of the future, but maybe they're a little bit shy, maybe they're lacking a little bit in confidence, but they just, get removed from the industry quite easily. It's real sad. Talking about kind of recognition and creative recognition, blind spots in the industry. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a huge blind spot in the industry. I think quite often we get really caught up in recognition for the work and the agency, but we kind of forget about the people behind the work, the people that made it happen, the individuals. And quite often they're not called out. And so an example of this kind of thing earlier on in my career, there was quite a high profile project going on in the agency, and it had been round a few designers and it had not quite right. So the client, thought that we hadn't quite got there so far. And I was given a couple of hours one afternoon and said, go wild, have a go, just see what happens, no pressure kind of thing. So came up with some designs, it got served to the client, they loved it, approved it, amazing, became the final thing. Then it actually became the longest running limited edition design for the brand. It gave them a 6% uplift in sales and it won a D&AD pencil.
Wow.
So amazing, super, super proud. But I wasn't given any credit or recognition for that by the agency. So of course there were other people that worked on that project and on that account that played key parts, and absolutely, they deserve credit, absolutely. But I felt like I played a really key part in that project. So if I'm honest, it hurt when I didn't get the recognition and any of the credit for it. And so I left that agency, and that, I wasn't even allowed to use that as part of my portfolio. So I couldn't even use that project to get me more work on my next role, or even look back on and say, I did that, because it kind of felt like I was being denied it. And so years later, quite recently, my partner actually discovered that if you have been credited in the D&AD annual, which I am, you can actually just buy your own pencil. So he did, he bought one for me, and it meant a lot more actually than I ever thought it would, because it wasn't really about the physical award. As much as having a D&AD pencil on my desk is great, it was actually more about kind of reclaiming the credit and the recognition for something that I felt like I was denied. I felt like I wasn't good enough to have, and it made me question myself a lot in terms of, well, I felt like I played a really key role in that, but did I?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, absolutely I did. And I deserve that credit and recognition. And that's why I feel so passionate about it. And because I can really see what it does to people, not only kind of professionally in terms of you can't have that in your portfolio, so therefore you could miss out on opportunities because of it, but also emotionally feeling that self-doubt all the time, because I think it's so important to have that recognition and that body of work to look back on, because as creatives we're emotional people, we're quite kind of sensitive to that kind of thing, and I think we always have that self-doubt there. So yeah, to make sure it's in place from the word go is really important to me.
Yeah, great. Fighting the good fight. How do you manage self-doubt?
So I always look back, and that is why I think your portfolio is the most important thing you can have. To look back on a body of work and say, I did that, I made that happen, I was part of the amazing team that brought that to life, is so incredibly important. And that's why I think if you are denied that credit, you lose that anchor. You don't have that anymore. And it's really easy to spiral if you don't have that. So I always look back. But the other thing I try to do is take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So if I've got self-doubt creeping in, that normally means that I'm stretching myself. And you can look at it two ways. You can say, I'm stretching myself, I need to calm down and prioritize and chill. Or you can say, okay, I'm stretching myself, but I need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, because that's when the growth happens. So I think self-doubt, sometimes it's okay to have a bit of self-doubt, because that's, where you're going to grow.
Yeah, it can be a driver. For sure. What does true creative leadership mean to you?
I think it's all about empathy. And practically, for me, that comes to life in three things. So I think it's clarity. I think the kindest thing you can do for someone is to be clear with them, so they're not always kind of second guessing. 2 is psychological safety. So making sure they feel really safe and comfortable to share their ideas and thoughts without being shut down. And 3 is recognition. It's not about being soft. It's about creating the right conditions for people to thrive And that's different for different people, right? So you have to adapt your leadership style a bit for, different personalities. But I think those three kind of principles are the three that are always a must. That's kind of the baseline core level of what needs to be there.
How do you nurture those spaces for your teams?
I would say there's a few things. So I think credit from the start's really important. And that can be something as simple as, presentation deck. At the end of the deck, it's not from the brand or the agency, it's the individuals that worked on that work to make it happen. It could be portfolios, so not gatekeeping. As long as the work isn't under any kind of NDA or anything, I would always encourage people to put the work in their portfolios. I'd never want to be a blocker for somebody else's career growth. It's so, so important. And then when a project goes live, I will always support them. So if they're posting on social media, if they're writing about it on LinkedIn, I will always like and comment and share to give them the visibility, because it's all goes towards their social proof. But there's not a better feeling than having your leader or your boss kind of publicly acknowledge you and support you and back you. And I think it's such a nice feeling that you've got that. So I try to make sure I do that all the time. It doesn't have to be like just on LinkedIn, but in meetings as well, I think to point out, especially in front of senior leadership, this was this person's idea. This was all because of this person. I think it really kind of builds that safety, but also like value. And I think that's what's going to make people really loyal to you and the team and the work, that they feel safe and valued.
Excellent advice. Couldn't agree more. We try and nurture and encourage that here, for sure. Nothing, something, nothing is the title in itself is a little bit about self-doubt, but it could also be about blocks and creative blocks and moments where you might even despise what you're doing because of a creative block, or you can't see it through anything. How do you deal with that? And is it something that you do have occasionally, infrequently, frequently?
So I've experienced both sides. I've experienced creative blocks and also having way too many ideas. So when I think
also a problem. That's true. Yeah.
When I think about my career and I kind of go back to that time that felt quite a low point where I didn't have that psychological safety, there was lots of getting stuck for ideas. And I think it was down to the environment where I didn't feel like I could really open my mind up enough to get that kind of fresh thinking and creativity flowing. Whereas when I was in environments that felt really psychologically safe, it's almost kind of like I've got way too many ideas. My brain is just on fire with things. And that is kind of my norm. I'm very much like too many ideas, which can be a help and a hindrance. So when you're trying to create a brand and you need clarity, sometimes it can be really hard to like wrestle with ideas and like let go of some of them and focus on the important ones. But that's kind of what I was saying about rationale, right? So you've always got to make sure you do this kind of litmus test of what is the idea? Is it clear, for one? Does it ladder up to the brief? Does it ladder up to the business objectives? And that's the kind of 3 checkpoints that I would kind of go through. So I'm quite lucky in the fact that now I feel like I have too many ideas, I suppose. But at the time when I was struggling with ideas, there were a couple of frameworks that I used to use to kind of come up with things. So the first one is simplify, magnify, beautify. And it pretty much does what it says on the tin. Yeah. But if you took, for example, a rebrand of a logo, so simplify would be kind of simplifying it down to its absolute core essentials, very, very stripped back. And we've seen over recent years, this has happened a lot with branding. Then you've got magnify, which Kellogg's did really recently. They blew up their logo. It bled off the side of the pack. Super, super bold and confident. And the third one is beautify. So it's looking at how can you make it more premium, more ornate? How can you add storytelling, heritage? How can you bring that richness through? So it's kind of 3 really quick ways in that I could always adapt to any project. It doesn't have to be brand or logo. It could be an ad campaign. So that was always kind of like a go-to if I ever did get stuck. And the other one is reframing the challenge as a question. So I would use how might we? So for example, if you're working on a coffee brand, you could say, how might we make drinking coffee feel like a ritual rather than a routine? And it just opens you up to kind of fresher creative thinking and kind of loosens everything so you don't feel so tied down.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I love that. Both those examples, really, really great. What's the best way, in your opinion, to handle criticism?
I would say separate yourself completely from the work, which is quite hard to do. I know for a lot of creatives, it's a very kind of emotional experience. We get really attached to our ideas, don't we? And we're like, oh, I love this idea. I'm fighting for this idea. And then when you get criticism, it kind of feels like a stab in the heart sometimes. But I think you really have to remove yourself from the situation, because it's not about you. People aren't criticizing you as a person. They want to make the best out of the work. So I think remove yourself, but also always assume good intent. Always assume that feedback that you're getting is to make the end project better. So you need to take a really objective view to it. And it's going back to the brief and the business objectives and being quite kind of matter of fact about it.
I think I sometimes struggle to gain the right feedback from a project. If a creative approach is a small cog in something, in a wider campaign, it's sometimes really difficult to understand how successful that has been. I struggle with that a little bit. I might be like very critical of the work or even of the process possibly. But I do find trying to get the right feedback is quite important. So you can be objective, objectifying your work, not self-criticize, but also just trying to understand like what's the opportunity here for me that I've missed. I sometimes struggle to gain that feedback. And trying to obtain that, I think is quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we also have to remember that not everybody is creatively trained. So not everyone's speaking the same language as we are. So people won't know necessarily, what lighting setup creates a particular effect, or typography terms like kerning and line spacing. People might not know what that is. We've got kind of responsibility to tease that out almost. And it's like, okay, you don't like this, but why don't you like it? What about it specifically? Is it aesthetic? Is it something to do with performance? Are we talking, tangible metrics here when we go into testing? What is it specifically? And I think as a creative leader, it's often kind of up to us to kind of tease that out for our team. So we're then taking that feedback and giving that direction for them to focus on in the right areas.
What is the biggest misconception about brand identity?
So this is a really interesting one. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently. And I think people get brand identity. They know the value in it, they understand. And I think they also get that emotional resonance is important, that we have to connect with brands on an emotional level. But I think there's this nervousness because it's so difficult to measure that aspect of things that almost it gets demoted in the list of priorities. And people will favor things like, does it stand out on shelf? Because that is a tangible, measurable metric that they can have as proof that the design works. But actually, it's just one piece of the puzzle. So yes, that's super important, but we also need brands to emotionally resonate with people. People need to remember them. They do need to stand out, and they need to have both performance and emotional side of things hand in hand to be truly successful. So I would say the misconception is that it's one or the other. That's not the case. It's completely both. And the emotional side is just as important as the kind of more performance, metric-driven side of things as well.
With brand identity in particular, is there any other brands throughout your career that you've always kind of gone to explain or to answer such questions such as that? Anything that you really look up to or you admire, you've been inspired by?
Yeah, I would say a go-to one is Coca-Cola quite a lot of the time because it's so iconic. Their colour alone will signify something in your head. The opening sound of the can will signify something in your head. You'll think that. It will literally make you feel thirsty. So they've created this brand ecosystem that just resonates with people instantly, completely memorable, completely iconic. There's so many distinctive brand assets that they have. It's not just the red, it's not just the script of the logo, it's not just the sound, the color of the liquid, the bubbles. It's also that association with Christmas. There's so many different things that they've done as a brand to make you remember Coca-Cola, make it iconic. And then they also have this kind of fix and flex approach to their brand as well. So whilst there's the core, there's all the things that we recognize as their distinctive brand assets, they have this space to play. Mm-hmm. So when you look at their kind of limited edition packaging, their NPDs, how the pack architecture flexes across their portfolio, they've got this fixed core element, which is iconic. And then they've got this room to grow and play and storytell and be creative and have illustrations on pack and icons and, you know, all sorts of different technologies woven in and all different sorts of experiences. And they're able to tell basically any narrative they want to.
Yeah.
And that's when I think you've really nailed it, when you can make people feel something, but it's not just a one-time thing. It's not just with one piece of communication. It's a feeling that is associated with your brand.
Yeah, exactly. May we just discuss that you're a mother?
We can, yes.
A mother of 3?
Yes.
And the youngest one is how old?
1 month.
Woo!
Brand new.
That's amazing. So obviously, congratulations.
Thank you.
Having a little 1-month-old. But 3, around that fantastic career that you've developed over time, how has being a mother affected you positively and possibly negatively, if it has, in your progression of your creative act, but also throughout your career, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it's impacted me hugely. I think, first of all, it's made me much more empathetic as a leader. It's obviously made me prioritize, be a lot more sharp with prioritization. And I think, it's changed things massively. It's really made me think about how I speak to people, how I approach people, how I make other people feel. And I think not to compare my team to small children at all, but when you are raising children and you're realizing how they pick up on everything you say, do, feel, act, everything, it's like, okay, well, if they're doing that, everybody else is doing that. So I really need to think about how I bring myself, how I show up, how I nurture the team that I have. So it's really made me be very self-reflective in terms of that. But also, there's the very real challenge, which all parents will know, that it's a complete juggle. Doing a full-time job and raising children, especially small children. So there's always this tension and this push and pull between career and family. And I think I've been incredibly lucky with Kimberly-Clark that they are so incredibly supportive and flexible in terms of that, which gives me the opportunity to build my career and my family at the same time. So I feel incredibly lucky.
Oh, that's great. It's good to hear. Do you have any advice for expectant mothers or women who are considering becoming a mother soon, who are still driving through their career, still trying to progress as much as possible, still incredibly ambitious? What advice would you kind of give to those women?
I would say have confidence in yourself, because it feels incredibly daunting. I think you feel like, how on earth am I going to manage all of this? And I think from the work point of view is almost the easy part. Because I think if for me, I've got 3 children under 4. If I can manage that, I can pretty much handle anything at work. So that's kind of the easy part. It's the balancing of the two. And I think you have to think about it in real terms. It's your life. These are your children. You're only going to get those moments with them once. It's the most important thing. And meanwhile, you have a career which you want to build. You have to build to a certain extent to be able to support the family that you've got. So they're both important. But I would say that you need to, for one, make sure you're with the right employer. That's going to make a huge difference to how things go and the pressure on you. You have to remember that your time is finite. So that prioritization piece is so important, especially when it comes to time with your family. So drawing those boundaries, making sure, if 5 p.m. is the cutoff point, then, that's the time you go spend with your family. Your phone's upstairs, your laptop's upstairs, or wherever it is. And you make sure you have that kind of that space and time for both. That said, like you need to show up 120% for your job as well. It's equally important. And I think it's about getting smarter, not working harder, basically. So thinking about how can I bring more value doesn't necessarily mean more time. It doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I want to go have dinner with my family and put my kids to bed, so now I have to work until midnight. That shouldn't be how it is. It's think about a way that's going to work for you. And yeah, like I said, I've been very, very lucky with Kimberly-Clark in terms of their flexibility and support. But yeah, making sure you're with the right employer as well that understands where you are in your life, what you want out of your career, and realistically what your day probably looks like, and being okay with that. I think that's a big part of it too.
Do you think employers have come far enough generally? I mean, it's great that you have a great relationship with this sort of conversation with Kimberly-Clark, but just generally in the industry.
I think things have come a long way, but I think there's still quite a long way to go. I see on LinkedIn all the time stories of, people who are in a very similar situation to me who have to leave their job because they can't make it work, because there isn't anyone to pick up from nursery and they need to be on a call at the same time. And, often mothers, sometimes fathers as well, but often mothers are being forced out of their career because of it. So I think there's still a huge gap in terms of what needs to be done. What I would love to do, and if I had a load of money, I would just go do it, is create a space where you can work and have childcare at the same time. So my ideal scenario would be an amazing creative studio or creative space that people could come and work that has on-site childcare.
That sounds great. 9 Tree Studios. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future of FMCG in relation to design and brand?
Yeah, this one's really interesting and quite a hot topic, I think, at the moment, because, since forever, FMCG has always been, or very much been, about pack, because it's that instant kind of split second of recognition that you've got on shelf to grab somebody's attention. And it can't be like that anymore because the customer journey has completely changed. You might see something on TikTok, you might then order it on Alexa, and then you might pick it up in a store that is completely cashierless. So the journey is not the same, but it's also not linear. It's not the funnel anymore. It's here, there, and everywhere, basically. So you can't have these brand identities that are completely static. They need to be living, breathing things and have that kind of flexibility to work in all those spaces. So I think the brands that will be kind of the most successful in the next decade will be the ones that are designing for shelf and screen and multiple realities and thinking about design as an ecosystem rather than a pack or individual elements.
With that in mind, what about the future is exciting for you?
Oh, there's lots of things about the future that's really exciting. I think a lot of people get scared of AI. I find it really exciting because I think it's going to open us up to doing so much more so quickly. And I think often with creativity, you have all these amazing ideas and it's kind of like, well, I can't do this because I don't have the budget, or I can't do this because it's going to take too long, we haven't got the time, or I can't do this because I can't find the right specialist to work with. And it's opened up so much more to us than we could ever have imagined. And I think people get into this kind of thinking where it's like, oh, it's going to take my job and, oh, what's going to happen? And I think that is true. We've got to be real. There will be some jobs that will disappear because of AI. And I think people who are focused specifically on technical skills only will find it harder and harder to stand out. So I think always there's going to be this kind of thinking is greater than tools approach. But I think for us, the exciting thing is that we can do whatever we want now because you have the idea and you can bring it to life.
I think if anything, creative should be the winner again. maybe the landscape levels off with AI at some point to a point, and it just becomes part of the toolkit that we all use. At some point, it's then creative's responsibility to utilize that toolkit and push it in a slightly new direction, like we've always been doing over the past like decades. So I think the creative will be celebrated again, and I think that's what's quite exciting about AI. So I think in the future, when AI is a little bit more, it's just part of the everyday toolkit, it's still down to the creatives to understand what is going to be emotionally resonant for our audience, how we're going to impact, what's going to be far-reaching. All the questions that we always ask each other come back down to us, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's exactly what you said. It's coming back to creativity almost. It's like, what's the idea first and foremost? And then what tools do we need to kind of get there? And I think if you're kind of stuck in this like bottom row of the tools and the techniques of how to get there, you almost can't see the wood for the trees. It's like, what's the idea? Then down from that, what do we need to kind of make it happen? And I think it just opens up this whole new world. And I think there's also this this kind of movement more towards like slow creativity. So going back to more old school techniques as well. And when you look at kind of Studio Ghibli, for example, who might take 10 years to make a film, it's kind of that appreciation for it. It's gone kind of full circle again. So I think at the moment we've got kind of best of both worlds. We've got this, I've got an idea, but I can execute it now because I've got this, you know, all these amazing tools at my fingertips, and I'm not kind of, nothing's gate kept anymore.
Unlocks a different way of thinking I've not been able to think about before.
Exactly. And then also there's this new appreciation for craft. So for creatives, that's a match made in heaven. That's you know, so open the doors to everything. Yeah.
So on that, looking forward again with young creatives, what, you know, how exciting is it for them? And also what advice, I suppose, would you give to that, to the younger generations that are maybe getting into the branding and graphical design or anything?
I would say don't pigeonhole yourself into something. When I was a younger creative, I think both at university and in my junior roles, mentors were desperate for me to like pick something. Like, what's your thing? Is it typography, for example? And I was always like, well, I don't know. I kind of like everything. And that was frustrating for them, that they couldn't almost be like, okay, your typography, we're going to put you on a typography course. That's going to be your thing. That was never it for me. And I'm so glad that I stuck to my guns on that, because I think now where we are, if you had picked one thing, you could so easily be, you know, irrelevant, that thing might not even exist anymore. I think it's about opening yourself up and saying, you know, at the core of things, what am I trying to do? What's the idea? And then think, what do I need to get there? So, you know, making yourself multidisciplinary, I suppose. But yeah, that's what I would say. And then the other thing I would say is that try to be true to yourself. So you're going to come across people who are going to try and give you advice, and some will be good, some will be bad. But I think you need to remember that it's you that's valuable. It's your perspective. It's your view on the world. It's your emotional and cultural insight that you're bringing to something that makes it special. So don't lose that part.
Perfect. Great advice. Is there anything else you would tell your younger self? Or would it just be those things? It
would be that, but it would also be to have confidence in my own voice, because it's always been there. But for me, it just felt that early on it was very dampened and not nurtured in the best way. So I would say, you know, ignore that. Have confidence in your own voice. So
nothing, so nothing. We have a few questions just to sign off. There's a nothing and a something and another nothing. Nothing number one. So if you had to begin from nothing, where would you start, or what would you do differently?
I think it's the listen to your own voice thing. It's the have the confidence in yourself. That would be the number one thing I would do differently. I think when you're young and you feel like you don't know what you don't know, it's very easy to listen to a lot of other people. But I think sometimes, and a lot of the time, you will feel in your gut if something isn't right, and you need to listen to that. So that would be the number one thing I would say I would do differently.
And what's your something that keeps niggling at you to do that you haven't done yet, that you wish you could do, wish you would do?
Oh, well, this is an easy one. Write a children's book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's something
Great.
I've always wanted to do. Obviously, I've read a lot of children's books now. And there are some amazing ones. There are some that are terrible. Absolutely terrible. I think I'd love to write one.
So when are you going to do that?
I don't know. But that's the one thing that I'm like, oh, when I get some time, I'd love to write a children's book.
So then if what would you create if there was no brief, no budget, no rules, nothing on the table? It would be a children's book, would it? As well?
Oh, that would be one of them. I think the other thing would be the space, the creative space.
Yeah.
With the childcare.
With the childcare, the creative studio. Here at Nine Tree, we'll try and make that happen. Christie, thanks so much for coming in to chat to us. It's been really great, really inspiring. Loads of amazing takeaways. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks.